You almost made it through without making a noise. Almost.
See this thing?
Little
Look at this.
wishbone.
No, it's made of string. It looks like a little pagan symbol to me. And for some reason, it was sitting here on my desk this morning, like a little warning or a gift. I'm probably going to discover that my wife came in here to use my scissors to cut a package. But for now, I'm going with the theory that this is a message, and I need to figure out what it is.
Well, while you contemplate life and do all that thing. Today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry Lab, folks. Check them out, cloudberrylab.com/FRD, and we'll have a little bit more about them here in a minute. But as Paul talked about pre-show, I was traveling this week to unhappy places, and now I'm back to, well, I guess really an unhappy place. Yeah. So here we are. We had a little time off. I know that made Paul happy. But Paul, I'm just going to jump into what is my background image just because I think this is hilarious. Paul, while this may look like the Olympic rings here,
Yep.
these are actually HomePod markings of a native HomePod that is on the loose.
So I accurately predicted how this was going to fall out, by the way.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. Because anytime someone accuses Apple of something like that, this is what comes out. A scurry of activity trying to figure out that other things do this too, right? Just like the phone thing that no other phone ever had an issue with, where it couldn't make phone calls.
Yep.
Apple had like a press conference to explain that this is a common issue with all kinds of phones. You know, it's too bad they couldn't cart it like Walter Mossberg out of whatever crypt he lives in now, so he could be like, I. You know, this isn't just Apple, folks. You know, like, seriously.
Really?
Seriously.
Yeah. So on that point, I will point out that I've had two Sonos speakers, not the ones I just bought, the Play ones, on a well-oiled table. Actually, it sits near my front door. I've had two of them on there for over a year, and I inspected for white markings. And Paul, can you guess how many there were?
0.
You would be correct. I would also argue that this table, although it's kind of hard to see here on the camera, is also a well-oiled and mahogany-stained table. And the Sonos One that I have sat on here for 48 hours. And how many marks do you think I see?
0.
Yeah, that'd be correct. I just...
Brad, we live in an alternate universe where if Apple makes an assertion, people will busily try to prove that assertion is correct, even if it's mostly just complete baloney.
Here's what I love about this the most, Paul, is that Apple always touts that they have, the best operating system, the most advanced techniques, QA testing out the butt that makes things great. But did they ever take, 5 minutes to put a speaker on a wood table? Apparently not.
Look, I don't even know what to say anymore. The Apple ecosystem is such that a company has already stepped up to the plate with leather circular coasters that you can buy at great expense to protect your beautiful wood furniture from your Apple HomePod. But, if this is seriously an issue, you've seen those coaster things that you put under like pots and pans for the table. They're like wooden-ish or whatever, and they're round. They probably cost like 99 cents a piece.
Yep.
Cork, maybe, something like that kind of material. Put that under your HomePod, and it will probably make it sound better because it will have that kind of nice natural resonance off of that surface. But the other alternative would be, and I know this is kind of a money saver, and it's not what Apple fans are looking for. Just don't buy one. Just don't do it.
And that doesn't seem reasonable, Paul.
I know. Even as I said it, I was kind of laughing at myself. That's a silly solution.
You're a silly human being. To keep the Apple troll train rolling here, folks, also this week, it was discovered that if you send a certain character from a certain language to any macOS device, it will, in fact, crash everything and ruin your day and possibly cancel your wedding. So
I don't have too much to say to this other than the fact that Apple, through Mark Gurman, recently revealed that it was slowing down iOS development in order to focus on quality. And I think that these two issues that we just discussed, this messaging bug and the HomePod thing, are excellent examples of how Apple's quality control has fallen off of a cliff, been dragged back up to the top of said cliff, and then thrown off again for good measure. Because seriously, what is going on? Like, what is that? What is happening?
Yep. And I will also point out, Paul, my evergreen joke that Microsoft can run with, and they can take this for Redstone 5. They can call it Redstone 5. It's like Redstone 4, but it has everything working. I would be totally in favor of that,
Sure.
By the way. And they can just
also
buckle down
for Redstone 5, I think a potential slogan could be Redstone 5. We may finally implement everything we promised at Build 2017. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
There we go. Anything bad to say about Google, so we can make it holistic that we've crapped on Apple. Now Microsoft.
I will just speak generally and say that my Google Pixel 2 XL still sucks. It's takes fantastic photos. Everything else about it is a constant thorn in my side. I don't think they've done anything new and offensive.
Have they, Paul?
That's what I'm trying to think.
Have they? Because I think they have.
Oh, they have? I'm sorry. Oh,
yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It wasn't actually a natural segue, but I'm just going to run with this. It was released a little bit ago, maybe give or take 3 hours or so, something like that.
Yep.
Google has released a vulnerability in Microsoft Edge that's relating to application code guard. And because Microsoft did not patch it within 90 days, Google said, oopsies, and then they published the exploit. So if you're running Edge, that exploit is now available to everybody. Microsoft was going to patch it this month, but they said, hey, it was actually a little bit more intense than they thought, and it will be patched next month. So if you're using Edge, please enjoy your next 4 free weeks of paranoia thanks to Google, because they published that exploit, even though Microsoft said, hey, it'll be patched next month.
Google's hypocrisy on this knows no bounds. I have a huge problem with this. But, yeah, they keep doing it. And yikes. Yikes.
Yep. So there you go. Speaking of Microsoft, because we were not really talking about them anyways, but I want to make sure we cover it. The Xbox One S and X will soon get 1440p support, and if you're wondering why the hell you would need that, that is pretty much only for people who are using monitors as opposed to 1080p TVs or 4K TVs. But I do know quite a few people who actually have these things rigged up to their computer monitor, and
including me, by the way. Yep. So last fall, I don't remember when, somebody offhandedly said that they would be adding 1440p support to the Xbox One X, which is the 4K version of the console. That was really exciting to me because I do use a gaming class 1440p display, and I'm using it now with my Xbox One X. So of course, what it does now is I don't think it's downsampling. I think it's called super sampling or whatever, but it takes the 4K game assets and converts them down to 1080p right now. So the quality is actually very good, but this is a native 1440p set, so the quality at 1440p would be even better. So obviously I'm looking forward to that. The thing that's new to this news, though, is that they're also supporting it on the Xbox One S, which wasn't the case, or wasn't known before, at least to my knowledge. So it's kind of interesting to me. It must work differently on the S, right? And so if you think just of games, even those games where you've downloaded 4K assets for some reason, which people can do on an S, I don't believe that it's downsampling or whatever the right term is 4K. I think what it's really doing is just upsizing to 1440p. So it should still be kind of a cleaner, better experience. But you're dealing with whatever the original assets of the game are. So a lot of Xbox One games are not 1080p to begin with. They're 720 or some interim resolution. But it's cool that they're doing it on S as well. So I think whatever console you're using, you should have a better experience on that display. It's good.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's going to be too upset by that. I guess, if you're running the original Xbox, you might be a little worried at this point.
Another reason to upgrade, right?
Yeah. Although, is this one of the first times that a feature that is coming to the X and the S is not coming to the original?
HDR, I believe, is not on the original Xbox One.
That is true.
I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably the other big one.
Mention the F word for fragmentation. Fragmentation.
I don't think of it as fragmentation. I think of it as having choices and an upgrade path. And seriously, I mean, just looking at just Xbox One itself, you can make that determination as each console comes out. Does it make sense to go to an S in 2016 or whatever year that came out? yes or no, depending on what you were doing with it. Obviously, that added 4K support for entertainment content. That was kind of cool. And then ditto for the X. Does it make sense now? Yeah, maybe. And, this year, as the X becomes less expensive, you can do that kind of internal calculus again. But I like that there's an upgrade path. And for people who are perfectly fine with what they have, maybe they don't have HDR support or a 1440p display, for example, the original Xbox One is fine. But they can upgrade or not according to their own needs.
Yep. And all joking aside, there is no fragmentation in the Xbox platform. That will only occur the day a game comes out that cannot run on the original Xbox.
Right. That's right.
So as long as that's still working.
Yeah, actually, and to that point, I think the coolest thing about the Xbox One ecosystem overall is that you do get an automatic upgrade when you go to the X in particular. So all your existing stuff actually gets better automatically just by virtue of having a new console. If whatever you have will be better on the new console. I think that's great.
Yeah, it's quite honestly hard to argue against that, although I'm sure somebody can find a flaw in that logic.
Yeah, people do argue against it, Brad.
But oh, Miracast is working today. It's my birthday, but not really. It's
Well, enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
It must be because you didn't turn it on for 4 days or whatever.
it's saved up all its
It's still
latency.
cold.
But anyways, folks, today's show, as we mentioned, is brought to you by Cloudberry Lab. Actually, Paul just wrote up a pretty honest review, and you should definitely go check that out. But these guys are great at managing your backups. Basically, you download their application, you buy a bucket of cloud storage from any vendor you want, and then you put your data there. And if the pricing drops over here, then you move your data over there. They make it super simple, protect you from ransomware, make backups super, super, super easy. I wonder if I can say super a couple more times here. But you should definitely check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD to grab a free trial and just kind of learn how you can do yourselves a little bit better when it comes to backing up. And I am rolling all over my tongue because you can tell as Paul sits there laid back and relaxed. You look like the meme guy from South Park.
I'm like literally drifting further and further toward a horizontal position as we go.
We've never done it yet, but the day you're in a hammock is the day I say, Paul, you might need to sit up.
Like just sipping like an umbrella drink. Sorry, I couldn't hear you over the sipping. What was that, Brad?
Oh, this pina colada is a little too sweet. Can you tone it down a little? Can you turn it down? Paul, I will tell you something that did happen. It's actually funny because my phone is partially working right now. This guy, which is an iPhone 7.
Yeah. What's going on?
It's a piece of shit. Pardon my French right there.
I mean, it is now, right? It was fine for a long time.
It's
when did you buy this thing?
Whenever the day it came out. That's
like 18 months ago, like not last fall, but the year before.
Yep. So the battery life is degraded, but that's not a big surprise. The problem is, in which I have an appointment with the AppleCare geniuses. Let me tell you how excited I am about going to an Apple store on a Saturday afternoon, because I'm sure there will just be 6, maybe 7 people there. My touch screen is off, I would say, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. So like if you're trying to press a button, you actually got to press to the left a little bit, and then it will actually hit the correct button, which was really fun because I accidentally called about 1,900 different people on Skype when this problem arose. And
including me, if I remember correctly.
That would be correct.
Yeah. So I know you will, but when you go, what time is this happening on Saturday?
2:15 on Saturday is when I have my dental surgery with Apple.
Oh, okay. So I'm sure you will not live tweet, but tweet as things happen. I'm curious to hear what the resolution is to this problem.
Yes.
Because you said you had Apple Care, and is that for like a 2-year term?
It is.
So it should still be valid. I'm just curious to see how they resolve this for you.
Yep. In theory, I'm hoping they just take it and say, oh, you have Apple Care. There's no damage. It's waterproof, so they can't, it's never been in water anyways. Mm-hmm. They should look at it and be like, oh, yeah, that actually is off. They should,
but let me give you some possible outcomes that I would. Oh,
great. This will be good.
So I guess, what's the best case scenario? They give you another one? The same device? They just give you one?
Yeah, they just hand me a refurbished one and say, here you go.
Okay, so we're going to call refurbished replacement the ideal outcome of this. That's never going to happen. That is never happening. I hope it does. Mm-hmm. I am of the opinion that will not happen based on my experience with Apple Care, but I hope it does. I could anticipate them charging you to replace the screen, because that's not covered by whatever this AppleCare warranty is. You might want to go look at what AppleCare does cover, but it might be interesting to do that. So that might be the worst case scenario, because that's not super expensive, but it's probably $129, something like that.
Well, I'll put it this way: if I have to spend $129 to fix this, I will just buy an iPhone X. That's
interesting. Okay. Yeah. Oh, maybe that would be the worst case scenario, because that would be the most expensive scenario.
Yeah.
The other thing, you mentioned the water thing. There are lots of stories of people going to an Apple store with a device. They look down the little peephole there and they're like, sorry, the little red thing is a different color now, and it was obviously exposed to water. It could, we don't know actually what triggers this. I'm not saying you threw it in the toilet. It could have been humidity or something, but I could almost imagine them saying, yeah, sorry, this completely voids the AppleCare thing, and thus the replacement cost is even more expensive or whatever, that kind of stuff. But I'm going to grab some popcorn. I'm going to sit in front of Twitter, and I can't wait to see what happens on Tuesday afternoon or Saturday afternoon.
Well, I can tell you this much: if they start yelling at me that it's because of water, you will not see me Monday. It's because I threw a chair at the gentleman and said this phone is waterproof. How can
I meant to put this in an article today and I didn't. And I don't see it here. I kept the transcription because I signed up for DirecTV Now over the weekend, and within 15 minutes canceled it. And they said, that's fine. I had paid for 3 months in advance, because if you did that, you got a free Apple TV 4K. And I was like, well, why not?
Sure.
And it seemed like this service was going to be something I would use. Turns out they don't let you record TV shows. Kind of a weird missing feature for a cord cutting service. So I immediately canceled the service, and he said, that's fine. Once May comes and your thing is over, we won't charge you anymore, whatever. And I'm like, no. I said, I need a refund. And the guy checked and he said, yeah, I'm sorry, we can't do that. And I said, let me be very clear about this. That is fraudulent and illegal. And I will be reporting you to my credit card company, and I am not paying this bill. And he said, hold please, I will see if I can do something for you. And then he eventually came back and they didn't, they refunded me. So, yeah, have fun at the Apple Store. It's going to be, an interesting stand your ground moment, possibly, unless they just show up and do the right thing, right? Maybe I'm not giving them enough credit. Maybe AppleCare has improved. I told you the story, I think, privately, the time I bought a new PowerBook.
Yep.
Dented it immediately, brought it in, said I would like to get this fixed. And they said, we don't cover that with AppleCare. We don't cover accidental damage. And I said, that's fine. I damaged it on purpose. Please fix this. And the guy, I think he literally went dead for like 10 seconds while he kind of understood what I had just said. And I said, what other kind of damage is there? What do you mean? Accidental damage? That's why I have a warranty, to protect against accidental damage.
Yeah, that's the thing why I'm optimistic this will work, because it's not, well, granted, I'm going to get off this podcast and drop it on my concrete floor and shatter the screen.
Yeah, exactly. But, right on the way there, like you'll slip on ice.
Yeah. Actually, true story. My wife was in the hospital after our kid was born, and getting out of the car, I dropped my phone. It slid off my lap because I was texting them that, hey, I was here, I'm coming up, and it slid off, and I shattered my phone right in the hospital parking lot. But the phone is fine. It's not damaged in any way, so that's why I'm hoping they'll be like, yes, this is a warranty or manufacturing defect or whatever the hell they want to call it. And yeah.
I wish you luck.
I'll tell you what I am going to do when I'm there, by the way. I'm going to check under every HomePod and see if there's any markings on their non-well-oiled tables.
They sent out a memo, right? Like they every day they clean under those things just to make sure.
Why is there paper clips under this thing?
Yeah, exactly.
Why is it propped up on matchsticks?
It's a piece of paper.
Oh gosh, Paul. And then actually, I haven't read this yet because I haven't really read. It's incredible how much you can miss in just 3 days of relatively being offline. And now I understand why people. Whoops, wrong button. Now I understand why people have no idea what's going on in life, because I missed 3 days and I was off kiltered. But you wrote up, and I suspect I know where this is headed, that Nokia should have chosen Android and not Windows Phone. Paul, tell us more about that burning memo.
Actually, you may not know where this is headed. So there was a Finnish book published about a year ago by some journalists from that country about the Nokia, under Stephen Elop. And and just from being kind of a Microsoft Windows guy over the years, whatever, that there's a huge contingent of Nokia fans, and they're very opinionated about all kinds of things. But A bunch of them thought that the decision to back Windows Phone was the wrong one from the get-go, and there was a lot of fallout over that. And of course, when everything did fall apart, it was a freaking nightmare. And not just for those enthusiasts, but I mean for the country. Like Nokia was a gigantic part of that country's economy. This book is written with a very heavy bias, and the bias is that of fans of Nokia who never thought that this was the right decision. So you got to kind of take that with the story a little bit. But there are some interesting facts in there because these guys did talk to a bunch of people who were very familiar with the stories and the insider stuff and all this kind of things. But the big sell job that Stephen Elop did on Windows Phone at the time, and remember, he'd only been at the company for like 5 months. He was an outsider. He came not just from outside of Nokia, but outside of Finland, the first ever guy to run the company who was like that. They looked at Android. They looked at keeping MeeGo, which was their kind of successor to Symbian, Intel-based. It was terrible. And they looked at Windows Phone. And basically, they were promised by Microsoft that they would be like an equal partner and they could help develop the operating system. A lot of Nokia technologies would make its way into Windows Phone, and they would get early access to what was happening, and they would be essentially a big fish in a small pond. And that was attracted to them, and that's what they took. They were never going to get that with Android, was the story at the time. Mm-hmm. Well, the story now is Google was going to offer them that same deal. Google wanted them so badly because they had such reach in markets in which Android at the time, which was still coming up in the world, did not have, especially emerging markets where the next generation 1 billion next customers were going to come from, places like India and China and Africa and South America, whatever. And they basically said, look, we have this deal where we have AOSP, we have partners who do this and that and everything, but we're going to give you the insider, we're going to give you special privileges, we're going to let you impact the development of Android. We're going to pay you for your patents so you have money because we know that's a concern. They were basically ready to give them the whole deal that Microsoft gave them. In fact, when you kind of look at it from that perspective, it's rather insane that they went with Windows Phone. The thing that's not in this article is that, and this is a fact, by the way, I mean, anyone can look at the situation from the outside and see if this is true. Nokia never had the chance to adapt Windows Phone to their own devices. Windows Phone, as it shipped on Nokia phones, was exactly the same as Windows Phone everywhere else. They in fact, were treated as outsiders the whole time. They never got that inside access that they were supposed to have. I mean, they were apprised of upcoming versions ahead of time and so forth, and some of this stuff did make its way into the operating system, obviously, but they didn't get the other side of it, that thing which is very easy to do on Android, which is to customize that thing for your device. They never got that. And, of course, it was also hampered by the fact that Microsoft sold them a bill of goods. The Windows Phone platform was hugely immature. It didn't have all kinds of functionality that it should have had, especially in the beginning. And when Nokia did things like come out with this like super high resolution phone, I think it was called the N9, that was not running on Windows Phone, when they went to bring that technology to Windows Phone, which they did in the 1020, the Lumia 1020, the performance was terrible because Windows Phone didn't support that kind of hardware expansion. They couldn't do optical hardware of their own in the device. It had to all be software based. So it was slower than crap, and it just never panned out. It was like the worst deal imaginable. Really interesting.
No, actually, that's not where I thought that was headed, but that's
yeah.
It's a big.
See, I've always argued in the past that like Monday, people are going to hear this story, see the headline, and they're thinking, oh yeah, with looking at it as a Monday morning quarterback, everything is 2020 in hindsight. It's like, no, it's not hindsight. This is new information about what happened at the time that completely changes the story. When I looked at this from the outside, I was like, look, it failed, but going with Windows Phone made sense because they would have been just another small player in a big sea of Android licensees. They were no one special, and we had no reason to think differently. Well, now that we know what actually happened, it makes their decision to back Windows Phone all the more suspect. Like that was a horribly wrong decision.
Well, it was a horribly wrong decision unless your name isn't Elop, because he obviously came out of this extremely well at the end of the day. So
there's a downward-looking chart you can make of Nokia's revenue, market share, whatever you want to say, over the course of this time, right? It goes right off a cliff. But there's some interesting numbers in this book that I think I might put into an article if there are enough of them. But one of the figures, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but in the 24-hour period after that Nokia announced they were adopting Windows Phone, their market value plunged by some X billion dollars, right? They actually lost, their stock price fell through the floor. When Microsoft bought them two years later, I think it was, or 3 years later, the amount that Microsoft paid to acquire all of Nokia's smartphone assets was less than their market drop the day that that thing was announced. So whatever that figure was, what was like 7 billion or something or whatever, they actually had already lost more money just in a day, had lost that much in market value, in stock price, basically, just in that one day. That's how big they were, that they, because they were humongous at one time.
Yeah. Speaking of
it's a fascinating book.
It actually sounds like it. Speaking of stock price, by the way, I saw the headlines running this week that Amazon had surpassed Microsoft in market capitalization. Then they went back and forth for a while. And for those of you who don't know what market capitalization is, it is pretty much a meaningless statistic. And I'm not just trying to like defend Microsoft, but basically it's the value of all outstanding shares, and it's trying to say that Amazon is a more valuable company than Microsoft. But these companies are both several hundreds of billions of dollars large. And basically they're just pointing out that Amazon, Paul, if you weren't aware, has grown pretty quickly and is now a massive company.
I mean, I don't think it's fair to compare Amazon and Microsoft in any way anyway, because they're completely different kinds of companies, even though some little subpart of each company competes with each other. And they happen to be from Seattle area, and that is kind of interesting to people. I don't know enough about the financial stuff, but I did cover this in short takes this morning. And back when Apple surpassed Microsoft's market cap, I covered this as well, because market cap, like you said, is completely invented nonsense value. But, someone had pointed out on Twitter, like what you have to look at is the PE ratio of the two companies. And there is literally a 10-fold difference when you compare Microsoft to Amazon. Amazon is a company that has posted, I think, approximately $7 in profits over the past 12 years once. And Microsoft consistently delivers what is quickly approaching double-digit billions in profits every single quarter. It was 4 or 5 billion for many years. It's in the several billion range right now. I don't remember what the exact number was last time, but these are different kinds of companies, folks.
Yep. And PE ratio, for those who aren't familiar, stands for price per earnings ratio. Basically tells you how profitable they are versus how much money they're spending. It's not a perfect explanation, but it's a very important metric. It's much, much, much more important than, say, market capitalization. That metric only matters if somebody's going to buy the company, because that tells you the minimum they can pay to acquire all the shares and essentially own the company. So, one of the things we do here, folks, on Friday as we reach the end of the show here is we take a look back at the comments. And unusual this week, I shouldn't say unusual, but this week I'm actually calling out 2 specific forum threads because I actually think they're quite good. The first one comes from BDSRRev, something along that line. Pronounce it how you will. He says, shouldn't Microsoft buy Grammarly?
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you saw my response to this in there, because I pointed out another service that is kind of one of those online, grammar, spell checking, whatever, but it's much more involved than Grammarly. You have to write the article on their service, but you can apply. It literally gives you like the reading level and whether you're using too many complex words, yada yada yada. Anyway, as you and I had discussed, I think this week, it's very interesting to me how many things that Grammarly catches that Microsoft Word does not. I don't actually write in Word every day, but when I wrote the Cloudberry backup review, I did use Microsoft Word for that, and I pump it into our CMS, and it's catching all of these grammar errors. And I'm like, what's going on here? And so, I fixed them in the editor, of course. And then I went back to Word to look at the exact sentences, and it's like nothing. And Grammarly is not a big company. Microsoft should absolutely buy this company, if only to fix Word. Like, here's this, like, the longest lived word processor on earth, basically, as far as at least the mainstream popular one. And, it has a billion tools in it for fixing these kinds of things, and it still doesn't do a good job of this. That's incredible.
No, I recommend Grammarly to anybody. Just get, and it doesn't work out well for their business model, at least not initially, but just grab the free version. I've used their professional version. It's good, but I don't think it's really necessary.
Yeah, I don't find the need. Yeah, I usually don't. I mean, I don't mind paying for things that I use.
Sure.
This is actually a really good example of something where I looked at what the premium version offers, and I'm like, for the way I work, I don't really need it. Is the truth. But listen, you may be thinking I'm not a writer. I don't need this, whatever. You know what you do write though is emails, right? You might tweet or whatever if you use a web version of Twitter. you need this thing. And you can get it for free. Just get it.
Yep.
I mean, just look at it. I mean, I find it to be incredibly useful.
Yep. And then the other, let's see, the other article or something, it's actually probably one of the longest forum posts we've ever had, comes from, I believe his name is, oh God, Wolfell. And he makes a very compelling argument, or at least an interesting thought, about making why he believes the Xbox Live multiplayer paywall and why he thinks that just the multiplayer paywall will eventually go away. And it's very interesting here. The crux of it is that they now have Game Pass, so they essentially have 2 Xbox subscription services. And I believe he thinks that, hey, the multiplayer portion should be free, and then they start bundling things into that Game Pass subscription service, and that's where Microsoft begins to drive the revenue from the Xbox platform.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. That's really smart. And someone, kind of dismissively said something like, "You're just trying to look at a way to make the subscription you're paying Microsoft to go down from $20 a month to 10 or whatever." No, it's a little more than that. Like, my fundamental issue with Xbox Live Gold is that multiplayer is part of it. Like, I've never understood. That's never made any sense to me. This Xbox Game Pass thing, however, and when you look at it as part of a broader potential subscription type that can span platforms and different offerings and so forth, not just about bringing Xbox games to Xbox. Yes, that's where we should be paying. That is a huge value add. It's just as good as Office 365, but for games. Makes tons of sense. I completely agree. Multiplayer games should be free. That makes no sense to me. And then the rest of Xbox Live, whatever the other baloney is, they can just pull that into Xbox Game Pass.
I'll tell you what does make a lot of sense to me, Paul, and this is actually interesting if they'd ever do that. For the most part, we know that they're working on game streaming. Google's got theirs. I'm sure Amazon's working on something with Twitch or whatever. We know that Microsoft is working on a game streaming service. When the technology's there, they'll ship it. What I think would be super interesting is that's when they will ship their Xbox media streaming stick that they had that was codenamed Hobart.
Oh.
Because you think about shipping a little stick that's, 3-4 inches long. It has the Xbox receiver in it, so it works with the controller. And then you pay $15 a month and you get the game streaming pass, and it just streams all right to that stick over your internet. That would be interesting.
I like it. There's always going to be, look, we can debate this stuff. There's always going to be an issue about what some are going to see as an arbitrary divide between free and paid, or this offering and this offering. You see this with, what's the difference between Windows Home and Windows Pro? Like, why would I pay extra, And over the years, that it kind of goes up and down. It's different depending on, the version and whatever. Look, we can debate the particulars here, but when I look at this, the central thing I see is the future, like as you're describing, which involves a suite of services which are useful and make sense as a paid offering. And then I see things that are just kind of basic, and I've always fundamentally disagreed about charging for multiplayer gaming. That there are other things that are valuable to people that they might or might not pay for, but that multiplayer gaming is just innate. It should be a basic capability of the platform. That's, I know
especially in 2018. Maybe when it first came out, that made sense, but I think that we've grown and evolved. I don't think it did. I remember when they announced this, I was like, what are you talking about? We play games on the PC for free all the time. Like, if you go back to the early days, like, obviously there were services too. Back when like games like Doom and the Doom-based games didn't really have built-in IP-based networking capabilities. There were services that kind of sprung up around that. And so when id came out with like Quake, I think, or like, let's say Quake World, whatever, that was part of the platform. They're like, we're just going to make this free. And people threw up servers, and it was just kind of made the whole thing democratized and nice. There'll always be paid services that offer certain things that make it advantageous to pay. But I feel like that kind of thing should always be free. And like when Microsoft came out with Xbox Live at the time, remember they had silver and gold. It was like, guys, multiplayer's in silver. Like, you can add stuff to gold where it's like better matchmaking, or but just the ability to play, like that should just be. I'll tell you what I would pay for with Xbox Live Gold are dedicated servers. If you're on silver, you get P2P servers and all that. And
you're paying for something, right? There you go. That's perfect. That's exactly right. You're going to get better performance. You could set up little goon squad things with your friends where you guys are all playing on the same server or whatever, because you live locally, maybe, and that server is local. It could be your server even. Maybe your Xbox is the server, or however you set it up. Yep, that's a great example.
You got anything else for today, Paul?
No, I'm still a little upset about this.
Yep.
You know, it's like the screen like kind of goes staticky, and then the next thing that you see like my feet hanging above the seat where I just was, and then it's some Wiccan thing.
Well, if your feet were hanging, I would just assume that you were trying to get warm in that room. Get up near the heat.
Yep. Well, at least he's warm.
At least he is warm.
How about you, Brad?
I don't know. Well, you're probably getting this too. It's 40 days and 40 nights of raining for the next whatever. I got home yesterday and it was 68 degrees outside, and I went to the gym and I was like, man, I should really go to the driving range. But I was exhausted after that drive.
Yesterday was in the 60s, and we're going to get snow tomorrow.
Yep.
Yeah. But you know what? Aside from this little hiccup, it's actually the forecast, broad terms, finally looks like what I thought it was going to be, which is reasonably warm days, even though it's the middle of the winter.
Yep.
And yeah, I need this.
Yeah, I know it's the middle of February, but I am anxiously looking forward to we're getting closer to that springtime frame where the weather at least can get reasonably warm, where I walk outside in my coat, my feet don't just fall off because they're frozen. So.
Yeah.
Well, that does it for today, folks. Today's show is brought to you by Cloudberry Lab. Check out Paul's review or go to cloudberrylab.com/FRD to learn more. And all things considered, hopefully next week will be a relatively normal week. I'm not traveling, at least not that I know of yet, and I don't think Paul's traveling. Although I did book my travel for Build today, Paul. You should do the same.
Did you book your flights? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I booked it all.
So my wife might want to come for the weekend, so we're going to try to figure that out. But I bet I book mine soon. Yeah. I'm going to try to. The issue for Build is we do Windows Weekly on Wednesday, and I'd really like to be gone by Wednesday.
Yep.
So we're going to talk to Twit. Yeah, see if we can not do it from the show this year. Anyway, I'll book mine soon, and then we can discuss how we're going to.
So with that, folks, have yourselves a wonderful weekend. We'll catch you right back here next week.